Hi there, Akeisha Anderson here, Policy and Advocacy Director for Alabama Arise, and I am excited to be here today to give you yet another legislative update. So we are in the final stretch of the legislative session. So as of this week, when legislators go in for legislative session this week, they will begin the week on the 22nd legislative day. So that means that as of this recording, we officially have only 9 days left, nine working days left in the legislative session. So that is not 9 calendar days. The legislature, could be in session into May. Most likely they will be. However, in terms of the number of days that they can be on the chamber floor, voting bills out to the next chamber, there are only 9 of those days left. And so last week wasn't extremely eventful. There was some conversation and deliberation about budgets. The general fund did pass out of the Senate and should be making its way over to the House. However, the House did not pass the Education Trust Fund yet. And so we anticipate that that budget will be deliberated in the House and will pass out of the House hopefully this week and make its way over to the Senate. However, a few other bills that we are watching in addition to the budgets um, do include bills related to childcare, elections, immigration, and more. So I'll just go through a list of bills that I hope you can keep on your radar along with us this week. So on Tuesday at 12:30 p.m., Ways and Means Education will be meeting, and one of the bills that is on the agenda for that day is HB 358. This is a bill introduced by Representative Daniels, House Minority Leader, and this piece of legislation, if passed, would provide a child care or would provide a tax credit for companies and nonprofits and other entities that provide childcare for their workers. And so that is a piece of legislation that likely would help a lot of mothers, a lot of families, etc. Also happening Tuesday afternoon at 1 p.m., the Senate County and Municipal Government Committee is meeting. They will be deliberating HB 86, amongst other bills. HB 86 was introduced by Representative Pringle, and this bill essentially creates a process to where people can cure a ballot if their address has changed by the time they go to vote. And so that is a pretty straightforward bill, not something necessarily to be concerned about. On the other hand, however, a piece of legislation that we are extremely concerned about will be heard at 9 a.m. in the Public Safety and Homeland Security Committee meeting in the House. And so HB 376 by Representative Yarborough is an immigration bill that basically, in a nutshell, allows local law enforcement to become proxies or arms for ICE. So to enforce immigration laws that local law enforcement currently cannot enforce. And so that is a piece of legislation that we are fearful could lead to targeting, racial profiling, and other things, and just making life a little bit more complicated and unpleasant for some of our neighbors and partners and friends. Also happening on Wednesday at 9 a.m. is a Constitutions, Campaigns, and Elections Committee meeting. At this meeting, there will be a bill, HB 448, HB 448 by Representative Daniels. This piece of legislation essentially would address some of the claims that you may have seen in the news related to the Democratic convention happening this year, where essentially the Democratic convention takes place after the date at which a candidate must qualify to be on the Alabama ballot for the general election, which means that President Biden could not make it onto the Alabama ballot unless we change the deadline. And so that piece of legislation is introduced as a way to change that deadline to where President Biden or whoever the Democratic nominee is for president still is able to make it onto our ballot in the state of Alabama because the deadline has not passed. Few other pieces of legislation, in Education Policy Committee, which will be happening Wednesday afternoon. There is SB 165 by Senator Smitherman, as well as HB 188 by Representative Collins. Both of these pieces of legislation are due process bills, which basically make it to where K through 12 students in public schools cannot be expelled or suspended without having some sort of due process rights. And so those two pieces of legislation we're excited about seeing hopefully make it through the process before time runs out, but we're really grateful for how far they have made it so far this session. And then lastly, House Judiciary Committee will be meeting on Wednesday. And two pieces of legislation that we will be monitoring there include HB 299 by Representative England, which is in a nutshell a parole reform bill, but then also HB 27, also by Representative England, which would require a unanimous jury before the death penalty can be enforced or ascribed to anybody. And so that's a piece of legislation that not only are we supportive of, but it's one of our priorities. And so we definitely are hopeful that that piece of legislation makes it all the way to the end this session. Again, we are hopefully wrapping up the legislative session soon. Again, only 9 legislative days left at the start of this week. And so by the end of this week, it is very possible that we will be down to only 6 legislative days left, just depending on how many work days they utilize this week. But either way, we will be sure to keep you posted on what is happening at the State House in these final days. Take care.